Hello, guys, and welcome to Off the Cuff with Kel. We've just got a little technical issue there with the introduction, but we are here. We are live. I'm so excited. I've got the most amazing group of people with me today. If you didn't get it, I'm Kelly Humphries. I'm an author, speaker, and survivor of child sexual abuse. It's my mission to break cycles of abuse and trauma by having robust, wild, crazy, off-the-cuff conversations with people who are doing the hard yards and the work. So I'm here with the amazing team from AiLECS. So that's the Artificial Intelligence for Law Enforcement and Community Safety team from Monash University. Welcome, guys, to Off the Cuff with Kel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. We got Campbell and Dr. Nina, amazing professionals in what they do. If you didn't know, so look, we'll just do a little backtrack for those of you who don't know. So obviously I'm a police officer. I've got 16 years of experience in the service, and as you know, I've been doing that for quite some time. And just recently, I have resigned my role, and I've landed in the wonderful world of the AiLECS lab with these incredible humans.
And we're thrilled to have you.
Oh, thank you, Nina. Thank you so much. I'm so humbled by, I'm surrounded by the most amazing knowledge and expertise and professionalism, and I'm just learning so much. So it's such an honor to be working in this space and also protecting kids and doing what I'm really passionate about. So I really wanted you guys to jump on today because I know you guys have got the campaign for My Pictures Matter, and the more I learn about machine learning and artificial intelligence, the more I can't say, or the more I'm like, we've got to be doing this. We've got to be protecting our kids and doing all we can to make work easier for those who are doing it. So I guess I just want to hand it over to you guys. If you could just introduce yourselves, and then we'll go in and talk a bit about what the lab's all about and get into some My Pictures Matter stuff. So I'll hand over to you, Campbell, if you want to talk about what AiLECS does. That'd be great.
Sure, yeah. So I'm Campbell. Yeah, I'm the co-director of the AiLECS lab. Would you like me to talk about the lab now or do other intros?
Yeah, no, start off with the lab.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll give you the quick history of the AiLECS lab because it's an interesting one. So around about 2015, an AFP officer came to me at Monash University saying that he wanted to do his PhD. His name's Janus Dellens, AFP officer from digital forensics. So at that time, he was in an area within the AFP that was doing a lot of work on countering child exploitation online. He came to me because he'd done a master's in IT at Monash and was interested in the IT field. He works in IT, and this is a bit of a nerd, Janus, actually, and he's really, really interested in the technology. And he came to me wanting to do the PhD, and initially he said, I want to keep my work life and my PhD life separate. And I can understand why he'd want to do that given the area that he works in his day job. So we started off doing something in IT. It was around social media and characterizing how news spreads on social media. But ultimately, we realized that there was a lot more value in him trying to, apply more of the AI machine learning research in the IT faculty here at Monash to the sort of work that he's doing in his day job at the AFP. So he then sort of pivoted in his research, and we started looking together at how we can use machine learning image classification algorithms in particular to try and triage child exploitation material. So trying to, help investigators sift through that material and locate material more quickly using machine learning. During that time, as that was being developed and Janus was doing his PhD, his management at the AFP started to realize, I think, the value of really quickly operationalizing that sort of research into practice in the AFP, because that sort of technology has a huge potential to make a difference. And as you said at the start, Kel, AI is not going anywhere, and it's just getting bigger and bigger, and it's everywhere. And unfortunately, it's a large part of the spread of online child exploitation, and it's technology facilitated in many ways. So using technology to fight fire with fire is very valuable. So his management, I think, started to see that value. They approached Monash, the AFP approached Monash and said, hey, can we do something together? Can we formalise this collaboration a little bit more? That's where the AiLECS lab was born. Since then, we've expanded, got fantastic people on board, such as Greg and Nina and yourself, Kelly. And we're now in our, 2023? We're now in our 4th year of formal operation. So I formally commenced in 2019. Child exploitation and countering child exploitation, that is with technology, is a passion project for us in the lab. It's really what gets a lot of us up in the morning. So continuing that development of technology, along with a few other things in the lab as well. But that's the real potted history, I guess, to get us started.
That's, yeah, a pretty good wrap up, I think. So Nina and Greg, if you just want to talk about a little bit about who you are, and then whoever wants to introduce the My Pictures Matter project, would be great.
Sure. Thanks, Kel. I'm Nina Lewis. I'm a research fellow at AiLECS. I joined the lab towards the end of 2021, and on and off been there ever since. So that's fantastic. And one of the roles I have at the lab is as the project coordinator for My Pictures Matter. And My Pictures Matter is part of my broader role, I guess, at the centre, where I'm a stream lead for ethics, transparency and community voice. So one of the things we're looking at is machine learning takes a lot of data, and sometimes it can be easy not to think too much about where the data comes from. And so we're very concerned with trying to contribute to creating ethically sourced, responsible data sets for use in machine learning. And so with My Pictures Matter, we're looking at how do we compile a data set that contains images of children, but that are required with the knowledge and consent of the people who are depicted in those images. Obviously, asking for consent directly from children is a complex area and very fraught. So the solution we came up with is, why don't we ask adults to contribute photographs that show themselves as children, and that way they're able to make an informed decision about, do I want to share my childhood photos with this project to help fight child abuse, to develop technologies that can really help in this massive problem. So that's kind of a very brief summary of how My Pictures Matter, the campaign to ask people to share their photos, came about. So I'll hand over to Greg, who's also done a lot of the technical systems-based stuff behind the My Pictures Matter project, as well as a whole lot of discussions around the ethics as well.
Yeah, so I'm Greg. I've been with the lab since about 2020. I wear a couple of hats. I'm a technical guy, so I build stuff, but I'm also really interested in the way information works in society. And so I'm with Nina, we think a lot about information privacy and consent of information and that kind of thing. So we were batting around, we can get into this in a minute, but the sorts of tools that Campbell's talking about to build a machine learning model that can actually identify child sexual abuse material needs a lot of data, and most of the data that's used to build AI in the industry is pretty much scraped off the web. And we don't think that there's all sorts of problems with that. And again, we can go in great detail about all of that. So we were sitting around and decided that what we should do is be asking people for images of themselves as children, as Nina said, and be a world first in trying to create large data sets for machine learning in a consentful kind of way. So Nina and I, designed this thing. I built it. Campbell paid for it. We launched it, and it's off and running and going from strength to strength. And we're slowly collecting the data we need. We've got a long way to go, but the system works, and it's going well.
So when you say, just to be clear, because there's a lot of people I think don't really even grasp the concept of what we're talking about. So when you say scrape something off the internet, what do you, can you just explain that a little bit more so we understand where you're coming from?
Yeah, sure. So the thing about machine learning is it needs lots of the things you're trying to teach it, right? So we're trying to teach this particular model. We're trying to get it to recognize instances where there are pictures of, where there's children in the picture, and sexual activity in the picture. So for that, we need lots of images of children and lots of images of sexual activity. And with My Pictures Matter, it's focusing on the children aspect. So just about everybody else in the world that does this goes and grabs pictures of children they go to Google and say, photo of kids, and they, Google returns lots of photos of kids and they download them. And they go to Facebook and download lots of photos of kids, and they go to Flickr and they go to their Insta and all of that kind of stuff. So they're scouring the web looking for the images that they need to build their model. And we're talking about thousands and thousands or hundreds of thousands of images. But the problem with that, of course, is that no one has given permission for their photo that they've put on the web to be used in this kind of way. And in particular, if you're starting to look at things like photos on, say, I don't know, Facebook, I might be in a photo that somebody puts up that I don't even know is there, and it's used for stuff. So we wanted to avoid that totally and actually try and directly source the images that we use, rather than go off and grab images that happen to be lying around the internet that people may or may not know are there, and that people definitely haven't given permission to be used for this project.
And the other, I'd just add to what Greg's saying, that another really, we hope, important aspect of doing it this way is that, child sexual abuse is a problem that is very confronting for people and very difficult for people to know, well, what can I do about this? So we're also giving people an opportunity to say, here's something really small, really simple that you can do to make a difference. Share a photo, one of your childhood photos, or share half a dozen of your childhood photos. So it's twofold. It's helping us create a responsibly sourced data set, but it's also giving people a concrete action that they can take to do something.
So why do we need to do this? Why is it such an important thing right now?
Why do we need to do this? That's a great question, Kel. So there's a lot of there's very effective existing tools that can, at scale, be run over, large caches of images, hard drives, whatever might be being scanned, and can identify child sexual abuse material that has already been identified, verified, and is known to police. Where there's a bit of a gap in the technology is in recognising child sexual abuse material that hasn't been previously known and verified to police. And that new material is obviously really, really important to find, because potentially those are children depicted in that content who are still in situations of danger and abuse. So we're targeting that part of the problem. How do we discover content that hasn't actually been found before? If, for example, a hard drive from a suspected offender is seized, or potentially to run over an online platform, so that it's targeting a slightly different area of the problem. So maybe Campbell or Greg can speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, I think a question a lot of people have, I think, is, how does a picture of Greg at 5 years old help in detecting child abuse material? The answer is what Greg was sort of alluding to before, is that The way that machine learning works is that it looks for, it learns features in images that it can use to recognize whether or not an image is of a particular class of something. So if you're thinking about how an algorithm works to identify whether an image is potentially an abusive image of a child, it needs to identify certain features of those images. And one of those features is the presence of a child. So as I think Greg talked about before, this is just one part of a broader picture here. So we're trying to get the machine to learn features of images which indicate the presence of a child. And to do that, we need lots of images of children. That's not all we need, though. We need lots of other sorts of images to recognize those other features that are likely to make the image not a benign image of a child, but an abusive image of a child. And those sorts of features will come from other data sets that we're working on, also ethically curating as well. And I think it's a really interesting conversation to have around this and to explain the technology, because this sort of technology is around us everywhere, and the more people sort of get to know about how this technology works, the better. And I guess that's another side effect of these sorts of projects, where we're trying to bring the community along with crowdsourcing the training data of these projects, is to a bit more literacy about how some of this technology works, because unfortunately in the child exploitation area, this technology is increasingly being used to generate this material as well. Maybe that's something we can talk about as we go along as well.
One of the other dimensions about why this is important, there's two reasons. One is there's a lot of stuff. There are millions of images out there, and you think about your PC. If I wanted to look at every photo on your phone or PC, there's going to be thousands on there, right? And in order to help law enforcement actually figure out whether there's abusive material or not, it takes a long time to examine every photo and say, is this an illegal image or not? So one of the things that this technology does is speed up investigations. So you run this thing over a huge collection, which could be someone's PC or laptop, or it could be a dark website, or some sort of collection, and much quicker than a human can do. This can tell us whether there's actually bad stuff on there that hasn't been seen before, which is what Nina was talking about. The other thing is that it actually takes a toll on the police officers that have to look at this stuff. So if an automated tool can actually, and it's what Campbell was talking about, this triaging thing before, if an automated tool can actually, without a human having to look at it, zoom through the stuff, say, yes, there's something bad there, then you can actually then take that into a particular process and quarantine situation and drill down into what's actually there, rather than force a law enforcement officer to actually examine photo by photo of horrible stuff of what's actually there. So it's this sorting into what's important, and then the police officer can step in and then do the investigation or whatever. It's not replacing humans, but it's actually just speeding up the process and saving some exposure to this material.
Yeah, I mean, I've been looking at a lot of research today for the other project that we're working on, and the numbers that I'm seeing, I mean, I don't even know that we can actually predict really how many images are out there, like of children that we just don't know have been harmed, that are still vulnerable, that are still, being abused, and we're not keeping up with the technology that offenders are using to commit the offences against these children. So I guess how soon would this sort of be available to law enforcement? Is it being used already, or what's the current kind of scenario?
So there's a lot of teams around the world working on this sort of technology. We're by no means the only team working on this, although we do think that our approach to curating the training data is somewhat unique. There are many tools available right now. The large tech companies do have tools that can scan their platforms for CSAM, including for new CSAM. So there is technology out there to do that. That technology as to how it's used in law enforcement is something you'd have to talk with the law enforcement agencies directly. But there is technology out there, but it's by no means perfect. I mean, this is really, really hard. This is a really hard problem, a really hard algorithmic problem to try and identify this material. So we're just a small cog, I guess, in the big wheel of the development of this technology as a whole. There are tools out there, but it's an area of lots of research and development.
And so I think there's some big concerns around privacy and those types of things when people are submitting their images. So I know, Nina, when I watched you down at the AFP in Melbourne, you were just so articulate with the press conference there, but I know it was one of the questions thrown around in that scenario there. So can you just talk a bit about how the privacy kind of goes when you're submitting your images in relation to this project?
Yeah, look, absolutely, Kel, and that's fantastic. And we want people to be concerned about their privacy. You know, I think it's important that people do stop and think about, oh, hang on, what am I doing? Do I want to do this? Is this safe to do? So we're taking a data minimization approach, essentially, as one of our privacy principles. So we're not asking you to share your name. We want the photograph of you as a child. We ask for a few little bits of information like the age you're depicted in the image and the location. But other than that, all we're asking people to share is an email address, and that is stored completely separately to the photograph. And the only reason we're even asking for an email address is to manage consent. So we're collecting people's consent, and by entering your email address, that's essentially your equivalent of a digital signature. And we also need to use that in case people change their mind and want to withdraw photos from the data set, because that's also part of our process. So in terms of privacy, we're trying not to collect identifying information beyond the fact that an image is, you know, it's a photograph of you, but it's not connected to your name. And, you know, we don't want to collect information about people. We want to preserve people's privacy. The data set itself is stored and managed by Monash University. For those who don't know, Monash University is one of the large group of 8 research-focused universities within Australia. So the university handles all kinds of sensitive research data and has some, you know, robust processes in place around how data is stored. You know, nothing in this world is foolproof, but as far as those kinds of systems go, you know, Monash would suffer incredible reputational damage if, you know, there were big breaches of research data happening. So both within the project itself, we're very concerned with protecting privacy and limiting the type of information we're collecting, but also more broadly, it's stored in, you know, fairly stringent conditions. And Greg can speak some more if he wants to about how he's set up the technology around actually collecting the images and information. Greg?
Yeah, look, sure. I guess, you know, without blowing our trumpet too loudly, you know, the reason we're here is because we are so concerned about privacy and consent and all of that kind of thing. You know, we, like I was saying before, we're one of the few AI researching organizations that are actually thinking about how do we actually collect data in a consentful kind of way. So we're paying a lot of attention to making sure we, as Nina said, we minimize the personal information we collect, and we store it in a high security sort of enclave in the Monash space, and all of that. And I'd also want to say that we recognise that the act of child abuse itself is a horrible violation of consent. Kids can't consent, and we don't want to be adding to that, right? So we absolutely don't want to build systems that further this violation of privacy, consent, and that kind of thing, and taking, and everything we've done to design the system has been, Nina and I spent a long time arguing and batting about and whiteboarding and going through the process of, how do we make sure that people consent to giving us their stuff, that we keep it safely, that people can change their mind, that they can elect to be notified or not notified in the future of how the information is being used, all of that kind of stuff. So we have this quite extensive process backed by this secure data storage mechanism to maintain all of this. We're not doing an Optus and keeping everything at the kitchen sink and leave ourselves open to being hacked in that kind of way.
Yeah. So how do you predict, like, once you've got enough of the images that you require, how are you predicting that this is going to be used? What kind of impact is this going to have?
Nina?
I think Greg's covered off on several of the really important places we believe this can have an impact. So one of which is the well-being of police, law enforcement officers who review this content by minimizing the amount of content that they might have to deal with. Another way that we see this having an impact is contributing to an ecosystem of responsible data collection and use in machine learning, and opening up those conversations about people being able to know how their data is used, where possible, to be able to, give consent for their data to be used. And, it's difficult to do that. This project's moving quite slowly. We're aiming to get 100,000 images, and, I think we're at about 3,500 at the moment. It's a slow process. So it's hard to do this, but what we want to show is that just because something's hard, that doesn't mean you give up before you even attempt it. So, we want to change some of the culture within data science that sort of has some, not all, not all data scientists, but for some people out there, there's an attitude that if something is on the internet, it can be, as Greg said, scraped off.
It's fair game.
It's fair game and can be reused. So we want to, push back a bit against that attitude. Obviously, developing technologies, adding to, as Campbell said, the variety of research projects that are working in this space. The more people who are working to develop technologies, the more likely we are to more quickly get to a point of, really efficient technologies and, different attitudes, different projects, all working towards the same goal. It helps you get there faster. I'm sure I've missed many things. As I said, the opportunity for people to be involved, to say, hey, I want to make a difference, I want to share my photo, to open those conversations about perhaps, okay, I don't feel comfortable sharing my photo, but maybe what I can do is talk about this campaign, with a young person in my life. Ask them if someone's asked them to share a photo online. A totally different context, but, ways to start conversations with young people, create safe spaces for young people to talk about things that might be going on in their life where they feel uncomfortable or maybe feel they're not making the right decision, or somebody's pushing them to do something they don't want to do. And basically remove some of the stigma around having those conversations, because they're difficult. Like the work of creating responsible data sets, that a lot of these things are difficult and they make us uncomfortable and they challenge us, but you have to talk about things, and you have to try and change things, make the world a better place. That's what we're all here to do.
So is there potential, obviously, so with this, be able to identify victims quicker, so law enforcement can obviously interrupt the offending a lot faster than perhaps if this technology didn't exist?
Our specific application is not facial recognition, so we're not looking at a facial recognition tool. There are other people who are doing that kind of work. It's the trade-off, I guess, around some of those privacy and consent issues. So, we've got a very specific purpose in mind. And as part of people's use permissions, they can elect to opt in to be contacted about different uses of the data set. So we haven't, completely shut down the possibility that some of these images could have different applications in the future, but they wouldn't be used without people giving specific permission for the use that they're intended to be put. And the current work is not victim identification or facial recognition.
All right. Sorry, go ahead, Campbell.
Yeah, I was just going to say, having said that, I think a downstream effect of this sort of technology is ultimately, the hope is that more victims are more quickly identified, in that you can't identify victims of crime until you find the evidence in the first place and surface the images and the videos. So anything that can help those investigations be sped up ultimately should, we hope, identify victims more quickly, if not through the technology we're developing directly, as Nina said.
Right. Wow. I just find all of this, like before I even stepped into this techno world of AiLECS Lab, I had no concept of these things, and I'm just blown away by I guess the potential. Firstly, what's actually happening, like what's really happening out there, and that we're just so naive to. Like, we just kind of bury our heads and we don't kind of think it's happening. But being put into this space, just realizing how big of a threat online child sexual exploitation is to our children, and the future harm, and that's should be every parent's almost biggest concern. Like, everything is on the internet, everything is online, everything is social media, self-generated material. It's so prevalent and it's so scary. So I guess that's the biggest thing, isn't it? Everyone's just got this fear around it. So you kind of have two things. You can either try to learn about it or you hide from it. And I feel like most people just hide from it, right? Am I right?
I think a lot of people think it's all a bit hard. And
the problem's hard, right?
Yeah, the problem's really
problem.
hard.
Like, so,
yeah, but the more light we shine on it, the clearer.
Well, offenders are using this technology, aren't they? And offenders are creating child abuse out of artificial intelligence.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think one of the questions.
So if you look at the reports of the international bodies that take reports of online child abuse, or read stories in the newspaper about various arrests that are made and that kind of thing. Internationally, we have tens of millions of images that have been reported each year. That's stuff that's reported. When there's a raid or an arrest or charges laid, individuals can have thousands or tens of thousands of images on their personal equipment. those sort of dark web sites where communities of offenders get together and swap stuff. Again, we're talking hundreds of thousands or millions of images. So the volumes are just mind-blowingly staggering. So anything we can do to help speed up the recognition and the discovery of this stuff, while trying to protect our law enforcement officers at the same time, is anything we can do is just so necessary to attack this problem, which is why, as Nina said, that we're very focused on this particular part of the problem. The whole thing is actually a complex, wicked issue. There's all kinds of things that could be done, and that people are working in different parts of the world. But we find that this is a really important piece of work that hasn't been solved, and as Campbell said, is a really hard technical problem to solve.
Mm. And the people that aren't shying away from that technology, of course, are the kids. And when you're talking about self-generated content, the fact that they've got these ultra high resolution cameras connected 24/7 to all sorts of networks, all sorts of platforms, they're vulnerable to all sorts of threats, and sextortion, as we know, is now a huge problem. The kids aren't shying away from the use of the technology, and I think this AI, in terms of generating content, and it used to be the case that probably the biggest place AI would be used in generating content would be kind of these filters, right, on photos that make you look better, right?
I need some of those, Campbell.
Everyone needs a good filter.
Yeah, cat ears, and
they really need one. But I mean, so kids are kind of used to that. But now it's you can do all sorts of things with an image, and all sorts of horrible things, and all sorts of abusive things, deep fakes of just taking people's faces and pasting them onto other bodies, etc., and all sorts of things. But even potentially worse than that, generative AI, like these models that can generate images from text prompts that have been weaponized to generate abusive images of children. And the barrier to entry to that technology is so low. People can just download these models and make use of them as they see fit, with very, very little sort of guardrails in place at the moment. So this is a huge concern.
You're starting to talk about things that I'm not fully over, Campbell. So deepfakes.
Okay.
You're talking about images that are just created from bits and pieces of other images and used for sexual purposes. Is that correct?
Yeah. So deep fake images, you can produce very, very realistic faked images of people in situations that they were never in, and like pictures of the Pope in a puffer jacket and whatever. These sort of famous examples, and Donald Trump being that's that's not unusual, is it? The Donald Trump being arrested one. But the images were fake, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm often talking to parents about not taking photographs of their children in the bathtub and things like that, because those images could be used for the purpose that you're talking about. But a lot of parents just have no idea that this is what's actually happening. Yeah,
but beyond deep fake images, there are now. So you're familiar with ChatGPT, for instance, which is a. I know you're familiar with ChatGPT.
It helps me write stuff.
So that's generating new text, right, from when you put in prompts. But there are other AI algorithms that generate completely new images just from text prompts. So you can type in, I want an image of a cat sunbathing on a beach or something, some crazy concept. But you can also modify these images. These algorithms to generate abusive content from text as well. And that's what we're starting to see now. So this kind of, weaponizing of this sort of technology is really really becoming a huge problem. Law enforcement is very concerned about this because obviously if you're generating faked child exploitation material and you can not necessarily know whether or not there is a real victim involved or not, that's a huge problem for law enforcement and a huge problem for society in general.
Yeah, well, I think as I was talking to the esteemed John Rouse not so long ago, he was indicating obviously that law enforcement would be chasing a victim child that doesn't exist, and the amount of resources and time that, you know, is put into trying to protect that child that they think exists when they don't is just something that we need to work on very quickly.
Yep.
And I guess I think one of the questions is can this technology, can My Pictures Matter, detect the difference between artificial intelligence and images created using machine learning and real child sexual abuse material?
Well, there's two parts to that. The first thing is that My Pictures Matter really is only about collecting the data, collecting the source images that then used to build these capabilities. Right. So Nina and I are not data scientists, and you know we're not algorithm people, but we are very interested in information and data and that kind of thing. So the My Pictures Matter project itself is this consensual collection of data. Campbell and the other people in the lab, they're the ones that build these capabilities, and this. So the primary question is this an abusive image? Then the next question, is it an abusive image of a real person, right? And that's the direction that we will have to go in to try and address the problem. But both of those questions, is this an abusive image and is this an abusive image of a real person, are still technically today hard problems to solve, which is why we have great people in the lab, you know, working at this that are kind of leaning on Nina and I to give them the data that they can use to actually build these capabilities.
Right. Well, I'm just going to put up a QR code. So if anybody wants to contribute their pictures to the My Pictures Matter project, you can scan the QR code there, and we will be waiting for your images.
But
we won't know who you are. That's
Kel, can I jump in quickly? I'd just like to say to people that we really need a diverse range of images. So feel free to, you know, submit school photos or playing with the dog in the backyard or selfies, whatever it might be of yourself as a child. If you're going to submit a photograph that has someone else in it as well, you need their permission to submit it and use it in this research project. And you'll actually get asked to kind of tick a box to verify each face in the image and confirm that it's either yourself or if it's someone else, that you have their permission. So I just wanted to qualify that. And we're most interested in the children who are pictured. So photographs of yourself, but share more than one image if you can. That'd be fantastic. You know, contribute an image of yourself at 2 years old and at 7 years old and at 12 years old, you know, and in different situations. And also, just want to emphasize that if you happen to change your mind and not feel comfortable about this down the track, you can contact the project at any time and request that your image be removed. And we will do that, like no questions asked. You don't have to say because X, Y, Z. You just say, I shared this photo and I would like it taken out of the system, and we will do that. So. Yeah.
And just to be really clear, because I know I've seen a couple of comments on previous My Pictures Matter, you know, calls for photos and things, is you're not after any images that are showing or depicting any sexual imagery. It is just photographs of you doing normal childhood things so that the machine can learn what a normal childhood photo looks like.
And more than that, Kel, it's not just that it's not showing we don't want abusive images, but in fact, similar to what you were saying about parents, you know, not taking photos of the kids in the bath, we don't want photos that have child nudity either. We you know, we want benign images of childhood. So we really want to be able to help an algorithm to, as Campbell has indicated, learn what the concept of a child, what features make a child. Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah, really important. Thank you, Kel. Please, no images of nudity or abuse or illegal behaviours of any kind. You know, we just nice, but not nice actually, because diversity. They don't have to be happy snaps either. I mean, there's one on our Facebook page that has me as looking like a very surly 16-year-old, you know, snarling at the camera. So, you know, don't feel that you have to have a big smile on your face. We want photos with big smiles on the face, but we also, you know, want other photos where your kids are looking bored or angry or upset. You know, we do need a lot of diversity for this to work the best possible way it can.
I just can't imagine you as a surly teenager, Nina.
I was a very surly teenager.
Awesome. So, all right. There's a couple of questions here. We'll just answer those. We did mention already whether or not this could identify real versus AI generated children. So is there anything further you want to add to that?
So that is a really, really hard problem. I know I keep saying this, they're all hard problems, but that problem of detecting AI generated content is getting more and more difficult as the algorithms that generate that content become more sophisticated. So in the early days of deepfakes and in the early days of these what are called diffusion models that generate images from text, you know, you could almost spot just by looking at an image that it was potentially a fake image. A famous problem that those image generation algorithms had was with fingers and toes, and they would generate very strange looking fingers and toes, or people would have, you know, 12 fingers, and they're getting much more sophisticated. So it's harder and harder for human beings to determine whether or not an image is generated by AI. To do it algorithmically, to get a machine to work out whether it's generated by AI, there are some techniques you can use, but it's going to be a little bit of an arms race. So as the technology to generate these things gets more sophisticated, researchers are going to have to move very quickly on the detection algorithms. And at the moment, I think the generation algorithms are kind of winning out. It's really, really difficult. There are some things that the companies that develop these generation algorithms could do to be a little bit more responsible here. They could embed invisible sort of watermarking into these generated AI images that are not visible to the naked eye, but which could be detected by an algorithm. That's only sort of being done very patchily at the moment, and it might take some sort of regulation for people to be, for companies to be forced to do that sort of thing. But the problem is that computer science research moves so fast, and the natural inclination is to open source a lot of this technology so that the community can continue to develop it. And as soon as you open source things, the first thing malicious users would take out is the code that would generate those sort of watermarks. So again, it's a bit of an arms race. So hard problem.
I would also just, I'll say it again, you know, Basecamp is getting the data, getting the collection of images to start building these things, and that's what my pictures is about, is getting to Basecamp, getting our 100,000 photos that we can sit down and start to, and whatever challenge the technology throws up is to have the data at our fingertips so we can actually be, you know, building the next tool that's not needed. Sorry, Kelly, I interrupted.
No, you're right. I was just going to say, like, I worry so much for our children. I worry so much for just our next generation, and honestly, like what we're up against, you know, and as I said in the beginning, is AI is not going anywhere. It's just getting. We can't ignore the fact that it's in our everyday. It's in everything. It's going to be in all of our processing, in our transactions, in our, all over social media. We cannot escape it. So we have to embrace it and be able to use it, as Campbell said, fight fire with fire. But it does concern me. I've worked in schools for a long time as a police officer, and I know what kids are like with their phones. And I have a 16 and a 14-year-old stepchild, and you just can't escape this. And I'm so concerned for our next generation. But I have hope when I get to spend my time with you guys and people in the child protection space who I know who are working so hard to try to fight against this. So I just want to acknowledge you guys for the work that you are doing, because I know it's hard, and I know you're coming up against some very ethical debates and some big questions around artificial intelligence, how it's being used, and privacy, and people that don't really know much that are saying a lot of things, and you're having to navigate this whole new space, and it's tough. It's tough being a trailblazer. So I appreciate the work you're doing. So I'll just pop the QR code back up again really briefly, but I wanted to sneak in a little question, Campbell, and I don't know what secrets you can reveal from the lab, potentially what other secret squirrel projects you might be up to that you can share about, because I think some of the work that the lab is doing is just so cool and revolutionary and things I've never heard of. So I think it might be very interesting to maybe plug the AiLECS lab a little bit and talk about some of the things you're doing.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Well, we've got a few projects on the go. Just not all the projects are related to child exploitation, but there is another one actually that is related. So we've been talking a lot tonight about image classification, detecting child exploitation images. But another big part of the picture is to discover how the networks of distribution of this material work, in particular on the dark web. So what that means is we're seeking to understand how these images are distributed, what those networks look like, what sort of language is used in those networks of distribution. And the point of trying to understand all of that sort of thing is to, I guess, try and help law enforcement get on the front foot in terms of disrupting those networks. So, when you've got a very large network of people on the dark web, for instance, you're likely to have sort of key players in that network that are the key distributors. And how do you most quickly find those points in the network to disrupt that network? So that's an interesting sort of algorithmic problem. So we've got projects working along those lines.
Yep.
Well, it's like following the messages and following the money and just trying to figure out, who's talking to who and who's sending stuff to who and who's paying for it and all of that kind of stuff to try and figure out if law enforcement is going to act, where's the best place for them to act and what's the most effective thing for them to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. Sorry, Kel.
I was going to say, so the projects that the AiLECS lab is doing is I didn't put the website for AiLECS up there, but I should have done.
AiLECS.org.
Yep, AiLECS .org for yes, all the projects I think are on the website.
They're all listed there. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us about any more really briefly? We've got a couple of minutes. So.
Yeah. So another one I think which is really interesting, which Greg's certainly been involved with, is the issue of explainability of artificial intelligence. So what I mean by that is, well, how do you explain this stuff?
I was going to ask you.
This is a hard thing, and particularly, if it gets to the point in courts where we're starting to think more about the use of algorithms in courts, and having to justify the use of an algorithm, and AI was used in the apprehension of someone, or it helped to disrupt a network. How do you explain how that technology works to the judiciary, to judges, to juries? how do you visualize the results to present to people? How do you even come up with text explanations of how the algorithm worked? So we've got a lot of work on that, on the explainability. Lots of other things. One of the other ones we're working on in particular is classifying firearms very quickly. So if police see a firearm in an image, we need an algorithm that can determine very quickly, not just that that's a pistol or a long arm or something, but it's a particular type of firearm, particular model of firearm. It's a very fine-grained image classification. That's another one. But people can have a look at the website. There's a lot of things we've got going. We're running very fast at the moment in the lab, trying to keep up with ourselves.
I know, and we haven't even talked about our project, but we're going to have another podcast, I reckon, and jump on and talk about the survivors' perspectives on the institutional use of child sexual abuse materials. So that's the project that myself, Campbell, Nina, Greg, and the amazing Carol Ronkin from Bravehearts is delving into at the moment, which is just in its very infancy to getting started, but it's all fantastic. Like I said, I'm just learning so much from you guys, but I'll just quickly, there's just two more questions, and Nina, I'll throw them over to you. The deadline for submitting the photos.
Look, it's an open call. We don't actually have a deadline. Essentially, we have a big target of 100,000 images, but we don't have to wait until we get to 100,000 images before we'll have a large enough data set to start working with. So essentially, we intend to kind of edition off, say when we hit 5,000 images, we'll create a small working data set and begin with that. So there's really no deadline. As long as if you go to mypicturesmatter.org and the website is up, you can submit your photos. Really encourage people to jump on board sooner rather than later, and also please share the campaign and the website with your networks, and encourage people to take a look and consider if they're comfortable sharing some photos as well. But there is no deadline. We welcome photos on an ongoing basis.
Awesome. And then the last question is just how many years do you keep the photos if they are to be used in other research? Well, you said something about consent about that anyway, right?
Yeah, look, that's actually a really good question. We haven't set a firm deadline about we will hold the data set for this amount of time, because we don't really know how long we're going to be collecting images for. We don't know whether, we'll be going out and asking people for permission for other projects. But what I would say is that if at any time you don't want your photograph to be in that data set anymore, you can contact us and we will remove it. So what won't happen is if an algorithm has been trained on that data, that algorithm will still be out there doing its job, in research or law enforcement, but we'll delete your photograph from the data set and it won't be used subsequently. We won't hold that photograph anymore.
And we won't use it for any other purpose unless we ask you first. So
yeah, and I think that's really good. And I'm actually really excited.
So essentially, how long are we keeping the photographs for? As long as you give us permission to be able to use the photograph.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I just love that you guys are a world first in ethically being able to source these images, because I do find it kind of concerning as a survivor myself. Looking at the fact that around consent and having some sort of control around this, and obviously with our project, the survivors' perspectives on the institutional use is looking at empowering survivors through that process. And I just think it's so great that you're able to do this in this ethical way, where there's a lot of organizations out there that are just, like you said, data scraping, and that is a little bit concerning. So I just think this is fantastic. I think it's a great initiative. I'm just going to chuck up the hash to what's that? A QR code, bloody hell. Again, guys, so if you can submit your pictures, there's a code there at mypicturesmatter.org. Thank you guys so much for jumping on tonight and being part of Off the Cuff with Kel. If anyone has struggled with tonight's content or found it triggering, please head to my website, Kelly Humphries, AiLECS.com. There's some support numbers there, or just reach out to me. That's fine. But guys, thank you, Campbell, Greg, Nina.
Thank you, Kelly, for having us on and letting us talk about our stuff.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure joining you and your podcast listeners this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Kel.
Thanks, guys. All right. And we'll see you guys in a fortnight's time. Thank you for joining us. And guys, any other questions, drop them in the feed and I will answer them, I promise. All right. Thanks, guys. See you next week.